Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third episode of the Blue Squad on Health or Health Blue Squad. And as usual, we are the three old bandicoots sitting here and venting about the developments in digital health and the spectrum that covers it. So it has been an interesting week. The last 2 weeks since we aired our last episode. So DeepSeek happened, wiping $1 trillion from the market. Everybody who thought they were sitting pretty on the top of the technology pile suddenly realized that they were not wearing any clothes. And suddenly China has become a big competition. Now, the question is whether that is an actual statement of fact or whether that is just a panic is something we'll discuss as we go along. And then yesterday night, the bomb dropped that Elon Musk has submitted a $100 billion bid for OpenAI. So that's happening. In the meanwhile, $40 billion investment from the Japanese SoftBank into OpenAI and all those. There's a lot of stuff that is happening in the market, and it's very difficult to keep up. The head is spinning, right? A lot of stuff is going on. So within that framework, I thought we will talk about the AI's impact on pharma. Right? We have been hearing a lot of stuff about how AI is going to revolutionize drug discovery and all that stuff. Now, to be honest, I'm not a pharma expert. That mantle falls on the both of you who have spent almost over 2 decades in that industry. And so I will open the floor to you. And most probably I may not have a lot to say, but let's go. Who wants to go first?
I can go first. I made a little research in that context. I went on PubMed, and then I started to think, okay, AI, what's AI? What do I need to search for? What has been published in the past? Because I had this hypothesis that especially in pharma, which is a very science-driven, data-driven, information-driven industry with huge spendings on R&D, which are knowledge-based investments. I mean, pharma worldwide spends 300 billion yearly in R&D, which is something like 14 to 30%, depending on the company, of their revenue. So compared to many other industries, their investments in their R&D are huge. And from past, through my last 20 years of career, also where I started my career, I said, pharma is already present with AI. It might not have been named that way since 20 years and plus. So I searched for terms, obviously AI in drug development. And if we look at publications on PubMed on the AI in drug development, it starts somewhere in the 90s. And it reaches something like 10,000 publications a year before COVID. Then it dropped, and now last year reached this 10,000 again. Same kind of for AI in pharma, much less publications, but same pattern. Interestingly, if you then think a little bit, how were these disciplines called before? Research for computational biology. Same pattern, it raised until COVID to something like 30,000 publications a year. It dropped 2024 back at the same level. Or if you search for bioinformatics, because that was one of the fields where I would say information technology was an essence to do all this research. Peaked in 2019 with something like 50,000 publications on PubMed. 2024 at the same level. So what happened during COVID? Interestingly, all since the 90s. And this way, I would say, actually, pharma was, when it came to drug discovery, drug development, probably at the forefront of AI. And I had an experience, it's 15 years ago, working in a pharmaceutical company doing research and development in a data-driven environment. We were using machine learning models in the mid-2000s to predict, be it adverse effect, be it toxicities, be it activity, be it safety, be it whatever. Yeah. So it's something which is not very new. So I was thinking, okay, what is different today? And I came to the following conclusion. I think one thing which is different is the generative AI or the Gen AI aspect. Let's call Gen as generative or general purpose. That might be one thing of the story. Kind of that models nowadays, they're not just yes-no predictors or classification predictors. They can be reasoning. They can be decision makers, which opens up the whole field of agentic models or agentic tools. Yeah. Second thing, what nowadays is called compute. So kind of the entire computational power aspect and the communication power aspect. If you look at computation or computing power doubles every 18 months. And if you think a little bit, probably for society and for general people, the biggest impact cultural-wise or mentally was probably in the 90s. And if you look at these graphs of how computing power raises exponentially the 90s, that's all flat like the 70s and like Stone Age. So it goes incredibly fast, which opens up a lot in terms of what you can access. And then I think the third point, which is probably the most important one, and which science-driven people like myself shouldn't neglect, but are often neglecting. I said AI was present 20 years ago in pharma. But probably many pharmaceutical companies, the awareness for, let's say, AI being their biggest threat and their biggest opportunity, that's something which only picked up its sense of urgency in the last probably 5 years, especially with these chatbots like AIs, where actually everybody could put his hands on and experience what it means. Before, it was kind of reserved to experts. And I think many pharmaceutical companies in scaling or in rolling out impactful AI solutions when it comes to drug discovery, drug development, they were failing with mergers and acquisitions, different systems, siloed data structures, no data strategy, infrastructural investments in that whole context were kind of in the ballpark of toys and tools for the scientists. And today, I think what shifted is that this becomes the essential foundation of these kind of companies.
So, Carsten.
That was the talk for today.
You've used up all words for today's conversation.
Well, I forgot to mention in the beginning that you two guys are based in Europe, Switzerland, and I am US based. So I think we can get a flavor of both perspective, just so the viewers can understand that.
Absolutely. No, I see it very similar to you, Andreas, and I had a similar experience, not in the pharma space, but if I'm looking, and we can put the post of Roche with the lab in a loop, what they are now following in Genentech. I've done similar things about 15 years ago in my research time, trying to understand better protein-protein interactions to eventually develop better targets for drugs or biomarkers based on the data we had in our laboratories, based on data we generated, based on the insights, based on literature. So like really was informed decision creating this very complex biochemical interaction models in order to have a better pathway towards a drug development or towards a biomarker development to eventually treat or identify patients in a larger cohort. And you're absolutely right. I think the computing power and all that stuff is a lot different compared to that time. Eventually, even the amount of data and accessibility of data might be different compared to 15 years ago. But it's also about the quality of data. That's what we learned 15 years ago as well. It's the quality of our own data. It's quality of public data. And this is, you train the model. And if you train at that point, maybe a simple model compared to today, and you have the generative aspect you didn't have at that point in time, but still, I'm going back to the good old things. It's garbage in, garbage out. So it's the data. And in particular, when you move ahead and you want to really learn fast from your activities. First of all, you have to do the activities fast, and secondly, you have to do them in a standardized way, and also in a very high quality way. So at the moment you do that within one company, eventually you might be able to ensure the quality and speed and keep the pace because of injecting money. But the moment you make it open and you make it across companies and you use public information, that becomes eventually a problem. And I think the main problem also at that point in time, 15 years ago, as well as today, I don't see the problem necessarily in identifying potential targets or potential risk things to work on, to do experimentation and to bring it into clinical context. I think that the bottleneck in the drug development, you can speed up that part eventually, yes, but that's not the real money and time eating part. The money and time eating part is the clinical and the preclinical studies. And this is the question, how do you speed up those? You can model those and say, okay, I accept that there is an in silico model, and I eventually jump some preclinical scenarios and go directly into clinics, so I can save money and time, but then the regulatory question comes. But from my understanding today, and you're absolutely right, the main difference, Andreas, today is from a business perspective, AI was a toy for the researchers and was supposed to fill the pipeline. Today, it becomes a strategic decision of the company. And that's the major difference. So the focus and the attention on those kind of activities is different. However, I still believe that the limitation and the focus should be in the preclinical and the clinical part. And then we're not only talking about the computational power, but then we're also talking about jumping eventual regulatory steps today in order to really make it faster and make it cheaper to market.
So thank you for that. Now, here is the thing, right? You both come from the pharma background. You're assuming most of us, including me, understands what you're talking about when you talk about the various steps. And what I think I would like to frame the conversation in a way is, what are the steps involved in drug discovery and production and all that? And at which stages did AI help or could help? So that's one part. So if you can think about that while I make some comments, right? Going back to what Andreas said earlier, that there's a substantial amount of money being spent by pharma companies on research. Now, here's the thing. I just read an article the other day. I think I sent it over to you guys about the DeepSeek moment for pharma, right? The companies out of China are developing drugs faster and cheaper. Now, you and I both know a researcher or a pharma salaries are way high. I'm sorry to say this, but it is almost $250,000 or more to hire somebody, or Swiss francs actually, to hire somebody in that sector. And if you look at all the major pharma companies, that's it. The mere fact that, so this is one of my experience when we were trying to hire a company to do some presentation materials. Their main clients were the pharma. And they were charging the amount that they are charging pharma companies was for a simple presentation, they were charging 75,000 Swiss francs. I tried to hire somebody who used to work in pharma for a consulting gig. Her initial quote to me was $60,000. And that was not even a month's work. So there is this overblown expenses probably because they were sitting on a monopoly and there were nobody else. They were the big cheese in town and they had these budgets that were being spent. So when you say $40 to $50 billion in research and development, how much of it was actually efficient is a big question mark, right? And that's why, like I said, the drug that Merck developed, Keytruda, which was for immunological deficiency or that area, that same drug was developed by a company from China, which was licensed by Summit, which is much better than Keytruda. And they are able to do that. And in the last 5 years, according to that one article, it says the share of pharma deals of Chinese companies went from 5% to almost 30% now. And the argument also what they're making is they're actually democratizing drugs. People who have cancer don't really care where the drug was developed. They care whether it is effective. So the fact that we have spent so much is not necessarily an evidence of better efficiency in drug development. The second point, what Andreas was talking about was, yes, AI in its rudimentary sense have been used by pharma companies for a long time because, pattern recognition is basically what we were talking about. Like we discussed last time in radiology, it has proven more efficient than actual humans reading the whole thing. It is 90% or something penetration in the market right now, AI-generated stuff. Now, from there, what has happened is, like you said, it has come to the generative model. But the thing that is taking the entire market by storm these days is the AI agents. So what's different, right? I think in our prep meeting, we discussed about this thing. So AI in general were used for analysis and in-depth research. The AI agents are now replicating processes. The other one was the analysis. The AI agents are actually executing workflows. So that's also becoming a bigger aspect. In fact, our company is going to release one of the first AI agents for care coordination and provider network in the coming weeks. So we are also getting into that bandwagon, and it has become, and it is predicted that almost major functions of most organizations will be run by AI agents. And it only works in companies that have good processes set in place. So how much of we know that pharma companies are using analysis-based AI, machine learning and stuff, right? Are they, or is there potential for them to transition to the AI agents kind of solutions that come across? And like pharma companies in general are highly organized, process-driven, so it's easy for them to implement all these things. Would that bring down the cost of this administrative procedures in the pharma sector? So having made those two statements, I want to go back to my original questions from where we can frame the conversation about what are the steps in the drug development? Where do you see the potential? Because every time I see people talking about AI, it's the first thing, oh, it is going to be great for drug discovery, right? And I've been scratching my head, right? It's when I think of drug discovery, it is people in the labs pouring, on test tubes and chemicals and all those kind of things. Of course, I'm making it too simplistic. There's clinical trials and all those things that goes around it. So now I'm going to shut up.
I think you touched several very, very important points. I think the efficiency question and the, let's say, the salary level question and so on, that's maybe a little bit a separate part, because it's a question of capital structures and capital allocation. And as a scientist, I would say the pharma industry is actually the only industry valuing science the way it should be, to be a little bit provocative. Yeah, but coming to the steps in pharma development, I mean, to make it quite simple, yeah, or in pharma research and development. Research, this is called discovery. One tries to discover, and Carsten mentioned targets. So something in your cells, in your body, in your blood flow, in your whatever, which can be targeted in order to handle or to improve certain stages in disease. So this is kind of basic research. A lot happens in academia, and a lot happens in these companies doing this basic research. You mentioned these Chinese companies. I think one would to make this statement, they are this much more efficient, this much more faster, and so on. I think you need to look at the entire bill at the end of the day and make a detailed comparison to have an opinion or a statement there. I try not to have one, even though I believe that, yes, they might be more efficient.
I was quoting the article from the Wall Street Journal. So
I was reading it. Yeah. There are several things in it which are clear to me. I think it's also an aspect of being kind of the second in a certain field, and that comes with a much lighter cost and cost structure.
Yeah, I think, Andreas, for the generic people, for the general people, you can say it's like a generic drug. So like you might know it from your aspirin. The buyer has a very long track record, and to be the second, it's kind of a generic. It's not correct, the statement, but it's much easier.
No, Carsten,
you don't have to do all the front work.
No, there's a difference there, right? India was the place where they produced the generic drugs cheaply. Now, a lot of research is not going into that. But India has not moved up the value chain. What China has done, they did the generic one, and they're moving up the value chain. They are producing drugs that are better and more efficient. Now, in the same article, they say they have not made any major breakthroughs like the Wegovy or those kind of drugs, but they are able to increase the effectiveness, which really requires more research. So it's different from what India did and is still doing, and what China is doing. So I just wanted to make that.
No. I just wanted to make a simple comparison to make it clear that the effort you have to spend for research is more compared to developing a drug from scratch is completely different one. Like if you're a follower, if there is already a target and you find a way, it's still research and it's still effort. I'm not saying that. And the generic is just copy paste. It's not changing, modifying the drug. But if you have already the target, if you have already the molecule, if you know how it works, and eventually it might not be patented so well, you have the chance to do a modification and to increase the efficacy and efficiency of the drug.
Maybe back to the discovery piece, yeah? So discovery is all about understanding the mechanism, the molecular mechanism or the scientific mechanism of a certain disease and a certain treatment and so on. And what happens in discovery is they are searching for models of disease, be it cell-based, biochemical models, be it in silico computational models, be it animal models, and so on, in order to truly understand the mechanisms of disease. Second thing which is done in discovery is to find actually called drug candidates or therapy candidates. And that's something, and you mentioned AI agents or kind of robots and all these people in the labs. That's something which already since many years works in many areas with a lot of labor work. Yeah, people doing experiments in white lab coats and so on, but also, and I think that's one of the aspects of the story, fully automated with, Carsten was mentioning closed loop labs and so on. There was a term called high throughput screening for small molecules, where one was screening libraries of molecules, libraries of compounds against such disease targets in certain models in order to find the ones which might be effective and safe as a drug. Yeah? Some of these models, they try to kind of simulate the mechanism of disease treatment, so addressing the efficacy of a certain new drug. And other models, they are addressing the safety so that they don't do any harm or any bad. They don't have unwanted adverse effects or other risks. So to come up with the risk profile. And that's kind of the discovery space.
Hold on 1 second. I have a layman question, I think. Earlier I mentioned the lab code and the test tubes, right? How much of that is actually done in a simulated environment where the chemical on a computer, and how actually...
Maybe I can comment on that, what Andreas said. It's like, let's take there's a certain part which is like really academic pipetting, as you see the people in the movies. But then once you have established an assay where you believe this is a good model, assay means there is a biochemical reaction where you can measure some light, for example, which is emitted when it happens. So basically you might stop a protein from interacting with another one, and this is the consequences that you can treat the disease via that. And then you're looking for a biochemical or a chemical compound. So you set up this experiment, and then there is a library of 2 million plus. I don't know how big they are today. At one point in time when I was there, it was about 2 million. And then you set up the assay, which is completely robotized. So you have the assay, you have to prepare the assay, you have to prepare the experiment for 3 to 6 months. And then you test against all these 2 million compounds you have in your biochemical or chemical compounds you have in your library. And then you get some light emitting signals. And based on the signal, you then can select particular types of chemical or biochemical compounds. If you think about automating that, you have all these chemical compounds, you know their structures, and you know the structure which you eventually want to target in your experiment. You could think about, instead of running this entire thing physical, you could run that entire thing in a virtual environment with an AI engine driven, like even thinking about how should the experiment look like. That's the thing. That's the step where you could think about doing. That's at least one point where it could think about.
That has been happening for quite a while, right?
Yes.
That's what you said. That has been happening for quite a while. So,
yep, but you still ran the experiment, the physical experiment. You did modeling before you ran the experiment, because the effort is so big to run one experiment. You have to think about to test one experiment. You have a preparation work of 6 months plus just to do the experiment, and to run the experiment itself also takes a couple of days because you have to test 2 million compounds, and it's a luminescent readout. So you need a microscope which is fast enough to read the data and so on and so forth. So it's a humongously big operational effort to run such kind of experiments, and they are still done even though you do the preparation on a virtual environment.
I think I think to put this into a picture, if a human has symptoms, is sick, one tries to figure out, okay, these symptoms, where does it come from? What would we need to treat? So one is building a model which is actually predicting the human's stage or the human's reaction to a certain disease. These models, that might be an animal model, might be a model in a cell culture, it might be, as Carsten mentioned, a biochemical model, or it might be in silico, a data-driven model, or an AI model, as we would call it to them. And now the trick is, since kind of predicting how a human reacts or modeling an entire human is a very difficult task, it's a field of research called systems biology, which was hyped like 10, 15 years ago, which was trying to achieve that. But that's a very difficult task. So what one does in that process, which we outline, is one tries to build different models which are predicting kind of the outcome of the next model. And now, in a computer, I take my library of millions of compounds, which I might have in a stock room over there. I take these compounds, or these might also be biologicals or whatever, and I run them through models in order to characterize them with respect to, let's say, the disease I want to target, or with respect to the adverse effect I want to optimize or to avoid, and so on. So it's a series of different models. Now, to improve these models, I might to generate data to validate them, or to generate input data to improve the models. And that's where the closed loop story comes in. And that's where probably, if we go 15 years back, pharma companies not necessarily did invest into just improving kind of the space to improve their models, because the success rates were probably not yet that validated. And that's where probably today the awareness that you need to generate data, you need to validate them, you need to put the validated information back into the models in order to predict again, and so on, and to have these closed loop models and processes. That's something which is probably today becoming much more popular than it was like 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you would do this mainly manually. Then you would add robots in a lab, which were doing these experiments much faster. Nowadays, you would probably combine them with AI and in silico models to have kind of closed loop systems doing that. Yeah? I mean, there is an interesting project. It's a little bit a different, scientifically a little bit a different story, but there's an interesting project by IBM Research. It's called RoboRxN, which is a system. You can look it up there. There are videos on YouTube, which is a system which takes molecular structures in a computer, kind of, it's called retrosynthesis, goes back with knowledge about chemical synthesis in putting them apart in order to have a new starting point to come up with a new route to synthesize that molecule. And running this in a loop together with a robot doing these synthesis experiments, proving whether the hypothesis was true or not, they optimize routes to chemical synthesis in order to, in pharmaceutical or chemical companies, improve actually the cost efficiency or the yield of synthesizing products. Okay? And that's a perfect example of such a closed loop experiment. Yeah? When it comes to treating human disease, that's much more complex. So I might not necessarily build a model which predicts the human reaction, but I might start with a model which predicts maybe the gold standard test for mutagenicity in order to avoid that this drug at the end of the day acts mutagenic or cancerogenic. Yeah? Or I might build a model which tells me which parts of my structure help actually to make this candidate. At that stage, it's not drugs yet, it's drug candidates or lead compounds, which make them much more efficacious in order to optimize them, and then come with these candidates which might be safe, which might have a certain efficacy, and bring them into what Carsten mentions before, preclinical studies. In preclinical studies, that's all about safety and let's say the how a compound is metabolized in your body. No? This is about making it safe before bringing it into a human study to prove that it's actually working. Yeah? And in these stages, there are a lot of tasks which are around experiment trying to prove that it's safe, experiment trying to identify the right compounds, experiments to or tasks to design experiments, tasks to design studies. And also there, I recently saw a presentation by a startup here out of Switzerland, the startup is called RiskClick. And they built, using Gen AI over the last 10 years, actually, they built a system to make the process of writing clinical trial protocols much more efficient. Yeah? So if we are entering preclinical studies, we have all these clinical trial protocols, we have a lot of regulatory requirements coming in. Yeah? There is a lot of potential in that multitude of requirements to do things wrong or not so smart or waste money at the end of the day. And that's somewhere where I believe as well that AI can definitely help in pulling these things together and giving on the spot in every second an overview or a assessment of whether one is on the right track or doing things right. Yeah. Which can bring a lot of efficiency. Mm-hmm.
On the clinical study, I can see, I think going back to my question about agentic AI, right? I can see a lot of use in clinical studies because when I did the research and we were actually working with some companies, clinical studies is basically, as far as I'm concerned, from my perspective, it is patient engagement, right? It is proactive patient engagement. You give stuff to them and collecting data. One perspective. Okay, maybe you don't completely agree with that statement, but I'm saying from one perspective, it is administering the drug and seeing the responses and collecting data and then refining that and changing. So it's much the same way an actual provider is supposed to engage with patients, which is not happening right now. So we have this product in our company which says high patient engagement tools, right? High engagement tools, which is really critical. And in that area, for instance, to keep track of patients and say, how are you doing today? And based on their responses, it can actually make suggestions or ask further questions and all that, which at the moment it is all pre-programmed, and if not those kind of statements, but if an AI induced model agent is doing that, it can do that, and if finds the patient in distress, it can call, and all the other tasks that a person can do can be done in that clinical area, right? So at one time about last year when I took the count, one company alone, I think Novo Nordisk, was conducting 472 clinical trials at the same time, right? Simultaneously. And going by what you said, if it is the bottom of the funnel, right? you start with a drug candidate and then the preclinical trials. There should be a substantial number of studies that they are conducting over a period of, even starting with that, to whittle it down to 472 clinical trials, out of which I don't know what is the percentage becomes the drug. So I can see where the expenses are going because it's not a mean task. And I just searched the database. There are over 26,000 diseases, that are being listed in the disease database from 1,400 pathogens, right? So given all this, right, I don't know whether we have a correct medication or remedy for all these kind of diseases. And some of the maladies that human beings have are focused on a very narrow population, which drives up the price of drugs. People don't go and invest in that because it's not worth, if it's only 100,000 patients, it's not worth it, right? If they do, then it comes with a price tag of $1 million a shot and all these kind of things. Are you thinking and are you hoping, and my hope is that the AI sort of development can reduce the cost of these drugs? In other words, people with rare diseases will get a fair shot that people with common maladies get, right? So there is enough leukemia patients in the world for them to develop drugs on that or any other. So when pharma companies make a decision as to go into which area, they obviously look into the economics of that. And this AI, whether it is analytics or generative AI or agentic AI, all these things coming into it, are you envisaging a situation where these people get a better shot?
I'm not sure if we should only focus on the rare disease ones, because at the end of the day, we have to ensure that treatment is affordable for everybody. In the US, you already, there's the limitation of that diabetic patients cannot even afford the insulin, and they're making it themselves now. Yeah. So I think we should, I think it's a good point to focus on the rare diseases, but finally, we should ask the question, how can we create drugs in a way that they are affordable to everybody? And it doesn't matter how rare the disease is, because we also, like Roche was even propagating this personalized medicine, and lots of others followed. But the point is, the moment you're talking about personalized medicine, the amount of patients equals 1. Because it's your treatment. So is that actually really feasible and affordable? I think, as Andreas was pointing out, there's a lot of steps in the procedure to a, say, viable treatment, whatever it is, where you can apply AI to cut out costs and cut out time. I'm not sure if, for example, like bringing up that one from IBM, where you optimize if you just focus on the process, that you optimize the production, the drug itself, to make it cheaper and more efficient. I rarely saw the situation that the drug was very expensive to produce. The moment you manage to put it in mass production, the price per unit is extremely low. What you pay at the end as a patient or as a healthcare system, that's a different thing. And there's lots of people opening their hands in between. And the pharma companies also want to have their shares, because they won't have to reinvest the money into the research again in order to get eventually one target or one drug out of 1,000 potential drug targets. So that's as you also mentioned, Sam, it's a big effort. Picking up your point, and also picking up the closed loop, because I'm a big fan of learning systems. At this closed, or this loop lab idea, or whatever you want to call it, I think the concept is absolutely correct. The question is just, and then your point comes in, Sam, with the engagement of the patient, because we know that about 90% don't make it in that preclinical to clinical phase. So there's already the patient involvement engaged. So if you modify, on the one hand side, say the IBM optimization, or use the IBM optimization tool for the chemical compound as an example, you need to also to integrate the data from the clinical and the preclinical. And in order to do that properly, you need high quality data to feedback loop to optimize that part. But that's a process which takes time. It's nothing you can just do like this with the data which already exists. And I don't think it's feasible. It's feasible to a certain extent, but I don't think the quality is there exactly because of the reasons what you mentioned, Sam. The patients are engaged or are not engaged, and you have to fill in forms. And I remember one story, like also with proms and prems and all the questionnaires. I remember one story from a lady which I used to work with, which underwent a cancer treatment. And I'm not saying what kind of cancer treatment, but a cancer treatment. And she was involved in the study, and she also used proms and prems, and she comes from the industry. So she knows what it means to have good data. But she was not engaged at one point in time anymore because she had to fill in so many forms. And if you do that, and so the moment, and you know it from a market research survey, the moment you have a saturation level that the people don't care about what they answer, your market research quality goes back. Same, I believe, is true for such kind of studies. So I think if you find a way to use AI to engage with the patients properly, to keep them motivated, to keep them on track, to really not just let them fill out some stupid long forms, which you can do in a much more delightful way. You can still track the data in a high quality, have engaged patients, keep them in the study, and then feedback this information into the, so to say, production. So where you eventually are designing the drug, and the question is how far back can you feed this information? But this has to be most likely an iterative approach. Yeah, I think there's lots of steps, and the thing is we have to build it in a way that the previous steps can learn from it. So it's multiple learning loops I think we have to implement, and we can use AI to help in the operations of the learning loops and the operations of bringing the potential drug to the market then.
I think to add to that, you said clinical studies, it's all about patient engagement. I tend
it's
to
not
disagree.
one perspective.
I think an important perspective or an important aspect of clinical studies is patient engagement, because I think a lot of the cost, not the majority of the cost, but a lot of the cost of clinical studies or failure of clinical studies, they have to do with either not getting enough patients, not getting the right patients, or having patients dropping out given various reasons. And I think that's for sure an aspect where data-driven and AI-driven or agentic systems and so on can help, as they can help in any other engagement scenario or in any other marketing scenario or whatever. Yeah. Maybe one other aspect, you mentioned the rare disease and the personalized medicine stories. Yeah. I mean, personalized treatments, I think we need to be careful. Yeah. This is compared to traditional treatments often not there is this one drug, this pill, and we swallow it. We drop it and we search it on the floor and we swallow it, and then it's treated. And this has been produced uniquely for me. Yes, in a way, yes, but it's an entire system which comes to that. And yes, it has a certain price. And I think same as with rare disease, yeah, we as a society, we don't accept that there is a kind of a philosophical aspect. We don't accept that there are diseases which are not treatable, or that there are life problems which can't be solved, and so on. So the question is a little bit what price we want to pay. And depending on where we go on this world, I think that it goes back to what is the value or the price of a human life. And this is very different if I'm on a island in Indonesia or if I'm here in Switzerland or in New York, US. Right? And the perception of it and how it should be handled is very different. Yeah? I think that's a very, very tricky story.
When you talked about personalized medicine, right? People really think it's kind of like walking into the yogurt shop and you picking each kind of flavor and then it immediately comes out, right? And that's kind of like a misconception. Now, advances have taken place that enables personalized medicine, at least understanding individuals as individuals, like genome sequencing, right? That has really led to the CRISPR breakthrough, which I think, as far as I'm concerned, it primarily addresses genetic disorders. It doesn't necessarily go to the other diseases side. So on the pathogen side, that is caused by pathogens, there's still other methodologies. So when people say personalized medicine, I don't really get it, right? Because the common people immediately thinks of that yogurt counter or a Chipotle counter. I mean, Chipotle is a major chain in the US, but that's not what we are talking about, right?
I think a good picture there is the following. Yeah, Carsten mentioned aspirin. Yeah, before. Right? If I have a headache, I go to the bathroom. I take one pill of aspirin, and my headache goes away. I know people, they can take 5 pills of aspirin, and that bloody headache doesn't go away. So they just are non-responders or weak responders to the aspirin. They might metabolize it in a different way, and so on. Yeah? And that's a common problem. So if we expect medicines or therapies to be kind of something like essential nutrition, it works for everybody the same way, this is for sure not going to work. So in personalized medicine, the idea was, I think the first idea of personalized medicine was, okay, we are developing this drug here. It's a treatment for X, Y, Z. Sam might have X, Y, Z. But now we know Sam has this one condition which makes this treatment we are having at hand inefficient. So let's make a test in order to tell Sam that this drug here or this therapy won't work for him. And that actually with this product or this treatment, we cannot help him, right? So kind of stratifying down the population to know exactly where does it work, where does it not work. And this, at the end of the day, saves money in the healthcare system, because the one where it doesn't work, he might suffer from adverse effects, he might suffer from other stuff, or he might mentally suffer from the fact that he is now getting that brilliant therapy and it doesn't work. Yeah? So it will generate other costs. So in the cost discussion, I think there are a lot of aspects to be considered. If we go a step further, I think there are more modern personalized approaches or therapies where, yes, you take a sample from a patient and you analyze that sample, and now in a production facility, that drug is tweaked. I wouldn't say developed or synthesized, I would say tweaked in one way or the other, so it perfectly fits that one patient and it helps that one patient. And maybe, and that's the other aspect, several of these high-end personalized treatments, which might be hundreds of thousands of shots, as you mentioned, they are in some cases kind of one shot and you are treated for life. While these general purpose or these traditional medicines, they were like, take the blood pressure issue, yeah? Everybody taking blood pressure medicine, from the day they start with it, they take it for life, and they get their package every month at the pharmacy.
Here is
So
one question. Yeah.
I think if you have these discussions, it's always easy to point out, one shot, 200,000 versus one pill, $2. Yeah? But you have to look at kind of an entire, maybe a lifespan or a patient history business case at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's absolutely. I think it's good that we talk about it because you're absolutely right, and I'm also using it to be provocative. But certainly, the personalized medicine really goes from that. What Andreas said, even like the personalized level starts like for him, aspirin doesn't work, or for me, aspirin doesn't work, and then I have to take another painkiller. So I have 3 options, but then I know that I can take this option in order to get my headache away. Or if you put it one level higher, not even customizing or modifying the drug to your needs, you could think about we have now the ability to print drugs, also in the context of the Chinese company that was mentioned. If you have a multi-drug scenario, you can even print the drug within the pill in a way that it's degraded in your stomach logically it goes from outside to inside, but you could print the drug in a way that, for example, the first component is released at the beginning, and the second and the third. So you can make multiple levels. You can even do gradients or whatever. So you can personalize it even on that level with already existing drugs or existing components, which you just print in a pill, which then is individualized to the person. Where you have a complete different setting compared to a extreme cancer case, for example, where a sample from the tumor is taken and a particular treatment is developed in order to treat this individual cancer type, you might suffer off, and you don't have to undergo chemotherapy, for example. Yeah? But this is the question for me. It's how can we make it affordable on the one hand side, and as Andreas said, maybe, like you're treated with aspirin all your life and it makes no sense, but eventually a multi-component drug which is printed for you saves it, saves the situation and saves your life. But how can we make this affordable and also accessible to all the people? And I think there AI can help when we build learning systems. And for me, it's all about learning systems, getting the data from Andreas, from myself, from Sam, put them together and say, okay, for the 3 of us, aspirin doesn't work. And then maybe we find a reason why it is. But eventually, even it's just document and we don't even have to understand why it's not working. But we know it's somewhere tracked. At the moment we receive a recommendation for a treatment, the aspirin can already be ruled out and other painkillers can be applied eventually to cure our headache or whatever kind of problems we might have.
It reminds me, like, I can take 2 shots of espresso and go straight to sleep. Whereas other people, if they take an espresso after 2 p.m., they cannot sleep, right? So there's different chemistry. But I think our time is coming to an end. So let me try to summarize the conversation, right?
Let me interrupt quickly. I think there's one aspect to which we didn't talk about.
Oh, yeah?
And
so for next time.
That up for a future session. We said AI in pharma, and we now talked about discovery. We talked about kind of preclinical development. We talked about clinical studies, and there is more or less impact given today's and future AI technologies. If it's done right, there is a huge potential and so on. But at the end of the day, pharmaceutical products, they're being marketed, they're being sold. If you're getting approval for a drug, you need to figure out how to bring this into the world, how to find the right healthcare professionals to sell it and so on. And I think that's an area where AI can play a role again, in one way or the
honestly,
other, which we should talk about another time.
But honestly, today I did not envisage that aspect of it because that falls into marketing. We can talk about the licensing models that I just read about, where they signed this particular drug for $150 million and then a profit sharing of up to $2 billion. Those kind of things. I have no idea about those things, but that's another session. But in the interest of time, and I don't think anybody wants to hear us rant for more than an hour. So let's try to be careful about. But I think everybody's vision of where this should go is personalized medicine, kind of like what we said is the computer should you should go into some vending machine and say, this is all the things I have. It goes and manufactures the drug and gives it to you at the end of the day, and you can take it, kind of a situation. Now, we don't know whether that's going to happen, but many of the blocks that would facilitate this thing is already starting to happen. It has not, in my mind, it has not reached a critical mass on that. So, for instance, like we talked about last time, the digital twin, right? Where all your medical history and everything in one single AI model, or, a downloadable on your kind of a thing that can actually have all your information going into place. Then we have the genome sequencing and then the CRISPR side of it, and all the other drug discovery part of it. And then the manufacturing side is a lot of AI is taking into place. The robotics are coming into place. But like I said, there should be something that connects, and this entire chain that starts from the customer side or the patient. I'm going to call it a customer, right? Because as we start developing a lot of things, there's going to be a lot of elective kind of treatments that people are looking for, like the current anti-aging, or let's just talk about the Botox and the beauty surgery and all those kind of things, right? So that's where it is going. And I think one of the statements I read recently is, in the next few years, AI is going to be 10,000 times smarter than human beings. At that stage, possibly, all these things can come into place exponentially within 1 or 2 years, and systems could come together. Because if you have something that is 10,000 times smarter than a human being, they can immediately develop a machine that will make these kind of things. They can find components and materials and chemicals that can make these medicines and put it all into a vending machine. So for a personalized vending machine, let's toast to that and end this conversation today. Any final words? Any last words for this interview, not in general?
I also think we should also consider that we are really in an inflated expectation peak of the AI world at the moment, I think. So let's see. There's a lot of enthusiasm, and I hope a lot of things, in particular in the healthcare space, materials, because it will create a better world. We'll help some people, but we are still in that situation that AI is massively hyped, and there's lots of expectations. Let's see what really materializes, and hope the good things will materialize.
Andreas?
I think that's one of the aspects, or the big challenges for traditional big pharma companies, maybe compared to the Chinese ones, which go through their evolution to become forefront innovators, probably as well. I think that the big thing is that at the end of the day, deployment of AI solutions in these fields all depends on very strong data ecosystems and infrastructure. And I think that's where the big struggle of many of these companies is, how to put this in place and how to make this work and how to leverage actually the data and the information you are having as an organization or as a company or as a society or whatever. And I think that's probably the biggest hurdle to take, because I'm a believer that AI by itself and by chance and randomly will not solve all the problems of our world.
All right. On that note, thank you all for listening, and thank you guys.